Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this council's first meeting of Finance and Corporate Services. Councillor Marsh is on her way, but she instructed for us to go ahead in the interim. So I will begin by taking a mover for the consent items. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Any... One second here. My screen... Okay, there we go. Okay... Okay, I actually have Councillor Marsh in the queue. Is her light on over there? Oh, okay, I just want to make sure that they were set up properly here. Okay, Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on those first two items.
On both of them?
Yes.
Okay, so you're moving that we take them out of consent?
Pardon?
You're moving then that we take them out of consent?
Yes, please.
Okay, so those in favor of moving these out of consent? And those opposed, none opposed. Councillor Gazzola, when you're ready.
No, on the first one, do we have any say as to what hours that they would get this exemption from? I'm just curious why they're going from Sunday PM to Friday AM as opposed to perhaps going Monday PM to Saturday AM. That way it leaves, I gather there's noise involved here, and that way it leaves Sunday night with noiseless.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, we can certainly pass on any information and make that request if council would like us to. We don't know how much that weight that will carry, but because they do have a schedule and contractors, so I don't know if they would have a premium to work over the Saturday that would affect their contract or not, but we can certainly pass on that request.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'm just curious as to whether that would work any different or not. So, okay.
Okay, next question.
And on the second one, I would like to know a little bit about what exactly are we applying for? Is it something that we already have in our forecast? And if so, what kind of dollars are we looking at? So if we're successful, what does this mean to us?
Okay, sorry, this one's coming up as staff 3. I'm not sure where we're... Oh.
I thought it was stormwater. Yeah.
Mr. Golden, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. The program is really geared towards disaster mitigation and adaptation. So through the Integrated Stormwater Management Master Plan, there are a number of programs that have been designed already to address, to the best of our ability, climate change and the incorporation of design tools when we do these programs. So specifically for this application, we're looking at road reconstruction projects, stream erosion, and the protection of critical infrastructure along stream banks, such as sanitary trunk sewers and water mains, as well as adding additional stormwater management facilities in areas of the city that have no stormwater controls, which is 75% of the city, and also partnering with REAP and the GRCA with flood control infrastructure that we have in the city.
So are these items that we already have in our forecast?
Yeah, through the chair. So we do have some of these programs identified in our forecast. What we do not have in our current capital forecast is approximately $45 million worth of flooding issues that we've already identified through modeling of our storm sewer pipes. Those are not currently funded in our forecast, so we could conceivably look at doing additional work to prepare ourselves for the extreme weather events that we've already seen some of.
Okay, so do you have any estimate of what we're applying for here? And if we get it, would we be applying that towards projects that we have in the capital forecast or projects that we know could incur someday but are not included in the forecast?
So the total value of the application that we're putting forward is approximately $125 million. 60% of that cost would be required to be funded by the municipality. That money is already currently in our capital forecast.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Marsh, I have in the queue. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize if this question has been asked, but I'm wondering if for item number 1, for the noise exemption, whether or not we know if the Ontario government plans to have an email notification list to allow for residents to receive notification in a timely way just before the overnight work will be taking place in their neighborhood.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, so their typical approach is hard copy mail out. I can touch base with the ministry to ask if they can set up an electronic mailing list to further refine that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, no one else in the queue, so it's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Those in favor of the consent items? And that carries unanimously. Okay, we are going to move into our first section of our budget, and I think Mr. Haggie is kicking us off.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm glad to be here this morning and talking about the 2019 user fee schedule. The discussion about user fees today is the first in a series of budget meetings about the 2019 budget. User fees are being discussed now so that the rates can be changed effective January 1st. The remainder of the budget meetings will take place in January, but Council will be getting information for the budget packages before the Christmas break, so by the end of next week. So why does the city have user fees? Municipalities charge user fees as a way to recoup the cost of providing services, which in turn helps reduce the need for property tax increases. User fees are mainly charged on programs or services where a citizen has a choice whether they want to use that or not. And I've just provided a few examples here on the screen, but as you know through going through the list that there's about 1,600 different user fees, so it covers a broad array, not just what's listed here on the screen. When setting user fees, there are a number of different factors that staff consider, and these include things listed off on the screen here, such as inflation. User fees typically go up by around the rate of inflation, and that's what's happening here in 2019, most fees going up by around 2%. Cost recovery is another consideration, and as you're looking through the fee schedule, you'll see reference to it in a few areas, so in operations, around utility cuts, and in utilities for water meter fees, they specifically reference that cost recovery as one of the rationales for that fee either coming into being or the rate of increase. Applicable legislation is also very important for us to consider, and there are some fees in the user fee schedule you'll see that say that they're just flat out legislated. And you'll see that in areas like building, fire, or cemetery. Market conditions are another consideration that staff use, and you'll see a reference to that in the cemetery section of the schedule. Some of the fees that are being changed there are directly compared with market conditions. Municipal comparators are another important situation for staff to be aware of, and some of the fees that you'll read of in the OD or aquatics or in revenue, note that they're similar to the fees being charged for similar service in nearby municipalities. And finally, industry stakeholders are important to us when we're setting our user fee examples. And the building fees have been vetted by the Waterloo Home Builders Association, so they're well aware of what's in the user fee schedule. My final slide is just a summary of the fee changes. This is just a graphic representation of the chart or the table that you'll see on page 3-2 of the report. And it shows that nearly 3/4 of the fees are increasing by an inflationary amount between 1.5% and 2.5%. The next largest piece of the pie is about 20%, and those are user fees that have had no change. And finally, the remaining slices of the pie account for less than 10% of the user fee changes in 2019. Mr. Chair, this concludes my comments about the user fee report, and we look forward to taking questions now.
Thank you. So anyone has questions on these items, including the list going through, we're just going to sort of informally go through, and you can please refer to whichever page you're speaking about if it's a specific fee. Don't be afraid to queue in multiple times if you forgot something, if you want to queue back in, okay? So beginning here, we have Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey. The question I want to ask is regarding to the development fee ones. In particular, I just want to thank staff for reaching out prior to this item and answering some of my questions. But the one thing I want to ask is, my understanding is when we go through the development process review, will these fees will be up to that as well, subject to that review?
Mr. Reber?
Through the chair, so it depends on which processes are scoped through the review, but the ultimate goal is to improve communications, consistency, and clarity through the process for all stakeholders. So some of these fees have to deal with sort of a third or fourth review, and that's when the fees start getting higher. So one of the goals is to clarify the process for developers so they don't get into that point, and by providing templates and other things that will make it easier and more straightforward to manage through the process.
Oh, okay. So if within that process change, if they're involved, we as council can look at this to remove some of these fees in case it inhibits the process?
Through the chair, so before we start our process review, we will be bringing a report to council to identify which processes we are likely to take through the review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had a similar question as Councillor Ioannidis. And so what I'm really hearing is, no, not necessarily. These fees are what staff are recommending. And again, we don't necessarily have a full scope of exactly what the review is going to be, but it's more related to focused on communication as opposed to the cost, the building cost that the developers may feel.
Through the chair, so it really does depend. I know I've heard feedback from members of council through our interviews about smaller applications or smaller developments versus larger scale developments. So if we're going through site plan review and that's the process we've identified, then we'd be looking at it from end to end. So I don't want to say yes or no at this point in time, but so I can't really commit whether we're reviewing the fees at this time, but what I can say is that we will be looking at the process from end to end, and that could include fees and changing the structure for different types of applications.
Okay, that's fair. Just I'm glad you said it, so that way staff can't say once it's in, right? The new fees, the pie graph, although they're on the overall or small component, as a value, what is that new fees coming in to the corporation?
Through the chair, so can you repeat that question? I didn't catch it.
The new fees altogether.
Mr. Haggie?
Through the chair, we actually don't know until we get into experiencing all the fees. We've just said these are the quantum of the number of fees that are changing as far as the dollar value of what they would generate. Like has already been mentioned, some of them are somewhat punitive for multiple reviews. So until we actually start charging them, know how much they're being used, we won't know what the total dollar amount is.
Would it be a considerable undertaking to have some sort of estimate as we approach the new budget, and seeing what that implication could be if there's additional revenue that's going to come in? I realize some of them are second, third, and not necessarily everyone will want to take it that far, but I'm sure from past experiences we would be ascertain what.
So through the chair, we can try to estimate. I think a lot of the areas that have introduced new fees have not counted on that a big spike in revenue because of the new fees coming online, but we can try to quantify what the dollar amount would be.
Okay. And the other thing is, the reason why I'm focusing on the development more than anything, similar to earlier question from Councillor Ioannidis, because a lot of the new fees are related to new construction and development, be it from utility, or be it from engineering, and some, not so much from building at least. We also around this horseshoe have grappled with the issue about affordable housing and the need for additional housing units to come online. Do we look through that metric, not necessarily just say, okay, some other municipalities charging it, so we should too, but also realize what that impact will be when it's a larger scope to the community?
Mr. Reber?
Through the chair. So if I could clarify a little bit, the development-related fees that are new that are outlined here are, we don't anticipate having to take those fees necessarily and charge them. So if you look through on page 3-2, the first one is related to the the asphalt driveway and apron is the first one, which is only a hold if the work is not done. So it's anticipated the work would be done as part of normal process, and that's just a fee that we would hold to make sure that work happens, and if it doesn't happen, we would do the work on their behalf. And then the next one, which is the third and subsequent engineering inspection fees, that would only be charged if work is not completed. So what we're finding sometimes is there's a commitment for a developer to do work that's on a list, and that work doesn't happen, and we send an inspector out. And then the planning fees are just the inflationary increase, but we hold those fees for a number of years. So it works out to about a 2% increase per year. So the new fees that are added related to development aren't necessarily meant to penalize development or add new fees related to development. We are aware of the need for affordable housing, and once that program is developed, we would look at how the fees apply and how that's structured.
Okay. I had noticed some others, but I'll queue out, and then I can ask some more pointy questions to those. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Galway-Seelock.
Yeah, mine is specific to page 3-35 with respect to the golf memberships for the juniors. Understanding that these are new line items, what was the junior membership prior to changing it out to two separate lines?
Mr. May.
Just give me 1 second here. So before we broke it out into two new categories. The junior golf membership was $404 in 2018. So we decreased the younger group and increased the older group.
Okay, so that's a fairly significant increase for the second, it's the Pee Wee Bantam Midget age group. Sorry, did you not? Yes?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So that for the Pee Wee Bantam and Midget age group, that's a $56 increase then.
Are you referring to item 992?
Yeah.
So that's a $46 increase, yes.
46, yes, sorry,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. Would there be any concern if we change that to $425?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's obviously council's will to set the fee where you'd like. It simply means that there will be a negative impact on the golf budget.
How many
We believe that by separating the junior membership to the two categories, we can meet the need in the community, and that's exactly why we've made this change.
I'm just wondering if stepping it like from 1 year to the next, like doing 425 this year and then an extra 25 next year might just soften it a little bit?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you were going to take that approach for line 992, I'd suggest you would also do it for 991, but in the opposite direction. So reduce it by $25 over the next 2 years.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to think about that. My other questions are just with respect to the there's a lot of new ones on page 3-43 and 3-45. Are these completely new, or are they just coming out of, being separated out of a different line item from before? Or did we just not charge these fees before at all?
Ms. McGoldrick?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, these are new charges. Previously, KU would have absorbed the costs associated with new services and new meters. The goal here is to provide clarity and transparency in terms of what those actual costs are to provide those services.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh?
Thank you, Chair Davey. So I have a couple questions. One is just about the parking garages and the increases in the fees. My understanding is that we had a heads up last year that we were going to increase the fees, but we are still the highest in the region, and I'm wondering if we can have assurances that we're not planning to increase the fee again next year.
Mr. Eamon.
Through the chair, so we would bring forward any decision through budget next year if we were to. We would like to see the uptake on the LRT before identifying whether we would ramp up fees further. We want to find that balance between providing access to parking, a strong downtown economy, while still discouraging private automobile use. So it's finding that balance between the three. We know that in the past the rates had gone up quite significantly, so we put the brakes on to get some more uptake in our parking enterprise, which we've been doing for the last few years.
Okay, so to that end, I understand we have success with our secure bike parking locations in a couple of the garages, the Civic Center and this one at City Hall. And are there plans to add additional bike parking cages in the other downtown parking garages?
Through the chair, so we have them at every single garage except for Duke and Ontario at this point in time. So we actually have...
well, I'm referring also to one at the Kitchener Market.
Yes, we don't have one there as well, sorry.
Right.
You're correct. So we are doing our refresh of the Cycling and Trails Master Plan, and part of that will look at bicycle parking as well. We have had success with it, so we would be looking to potentially expand that further.
And would that be implemented in 2019? Is there an option to put that on a fast track for approval before the... I'm just concerned that we're going to go another year before anything is implemented for increasing secure bike parking in the downtown area.
Through the chair, so I can take that back to staff and talk to them. This wouldn't affect the fee schedule today, but I can certainly have that discussion with staff.
Right, that's fine. You're right. I also have a question about the new fee for a sidewalk cut. Is there ever going to be a time when a property owner will be forced to use that sidewalk cut fee? Sorry, I don't have the page number of it. 3.5. So I want to know if there's a chance that we can offer, if people don't want to pay our minimum fee for the small amount of square meters, if they can go to a private provider instead.
Through the chair, can you refer to which page number this is on?
Yes.
And the line number?
It's referred to on page 3-5, and it's sidewalk cut fee 1046 and 1047.
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through the chair, Councillor Marsh is correct. Currently, sidewalk cuts and repairs are only done by city staff. I can take your suggestion back. I understand that in looking at other municipal service delivery models that it's mixed in our region, and can certainly take that question back to them.
I just think that $1,356 is a lot of money if you just need 1 square meter, and if our staff aren't able to provide that at a lower rate, then I'd just like our residents to have that option if needed. So thank you. And my last question is regarding the leisure access card. I'm just wanting to ask staff to remind council, as we are increasing these fees, what does the leisure access card provide, and will the monetary value of the leisure access card be increased as well?
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So currently the leisure access card provides $215 for an adult and $250 for a child or a youth. While there are currently no plans to increase that from a staff perspective, I can tell you that over the past 2 years we've made a couple of really good changes. So a couple of years ago we had a limit that said you could only use $60 maximum of that $250 for a program. We last year increased that limit to 120, so somebody could use 120 for a single program. Starting in 2019, there'll be no limit on that. So if an individual wanted to use $250 on a single program, they'd be allowed to do that. And where we've seen that have the greatest impact is in registrations in some of our summer camps, which are a bit more expensive in nature, and so without increasing the budget limit, they're able to get better access. If it would be council's direction or desire to look at increasing that limit, I would suggest that we need to prepare an issue paper to come back as part of the budget process.
Okay, thank you. And so just I'm out of time, but I have one quick follow-up question on that one.
Go ahead.
Okay, so just to say, I want to know when a person applies for the leisure access card, is it clear to them that the card allows those amounts you've mentioned, 215 and 250 for the year, or do they have to then reapply if they want to continue using it later on? Like, for example, if they don't use all of it, if they're just using it for one swimming class for 8 weeks or something like that, would they need to then reapply, or would they have that access card to use later for something else?
Through you, Mr. Chair, when they apply, it's very clear. I actually have the application right here. It's very clear that they get access to $250, and they can use that throughout the year for any number of programs.
Super. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's showing up as empty, but I presume Mayor Pravanovich, you're in the queue? Okay, you are now known as empty, but go ahead. Oh, let's try this again. Oh, I'm clicking on it, but it's... Yes. Okay. Hey, Mayor Pravanovich, you're here now.
Oh, okay. I exist. Thank you.
When you're ready.
I feel much better. I was starting to worry. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a couple quick questions that are follow-ups on ones that have already been asked by others in a way. But on the sidewalk cuts, are we talking about, like, can you give some examples of what we're talking about here? Like, we're not talking about driveway cuts here, are we?
Ms. McGoldrick?
So through you, Chair, no, we're talking about contractors performing work associated with a private property development or retrofit that requires removal of sidewalk and then the restoration of that sidewalk. And so the new to this year is there used to be a unit rate applied for all sidewalks. New this year is a flat fee, which was done based on analysis of typical size cuts, so ranging from 2.25 meters squared to 9, and averaging out what those costs would be to the municipality.
No, and I understand that, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is what kind of jobs are we talking about? Is this, for example, somebody replacing their water pipe to their house, or like what kind of circumstances of it?
So it could be related to servicing work. It could be related to landscape features on the property. It could be related to new development infill sites associated with the property.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get at, and this is I think where Councillor Marsh was going as well, is I'm just trying to understand the relationship between this particular cost versus the cost of the rest of the cost of the work actually getting done, and that we're not creating a scenario where, you know, quite frankly, this becomes almost the predominant cost in the work being done.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, I would need to get some additional information from staff in terms of how this cost would compare to typically the overall cost of works. Certainly from a utility servicing perspective, it would be a small component of the overall costs, but in terms of other scenarios, I would need to look at.
Okay, and maybe you can get that in an email to us before this comes back next Monday at Council. The second question is in relation to the parking fees, and I certainly welcome some of the innovations that we seem to be approaching around the nighttime program and the special event programming and a few of those other things. because I think they will help. I am wondering, though, if you can remind us, I know there's sort of a review going on in parking. Where are we at in terms of being able to get to the point of, having flexible pricing that may adjust with use and that kind of initiative? Because I understand that's something we're looking at.
Mr.
Through the chair, so there's a few things. One is we are finalizing the contract for pay by phone for parking, which is something that's a really great service that will be provided, so people can top up their parking with their phone, and other municipalities in the region can tie into that. So that should be rolling out early next year, because I know we're just going back and forth on the contract right now. And then the lab at Communitech is working on a rollout for a pilot for parking, which is the first step to get to a point where we can do flexible or variable rate parking. So getting sensors and getting those tested is the first step. So I can follow up with the lab to see what the timelines are for that rollout, but we need that step before we can get to the variable rate parking.
Okay, because I think that seems to be a way to go, and we see it working in other models, including airfares and hotels and all those kinds of things, where things adjust based on demand, and it may be a way of increasing our overall revenue stream where possible, and something that certainly I'd like to see us look at.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I want to go back to where Councillor Singh was, direction he was headed in the questioning as to what kind of dollars are we producing here. In the past, I thought we had some ideas for if example, we wanted to increase everything 5%, not 5%, 0.5% overall, or go in one direction or the other. Do we not have some idea of what kind of dollars we're talking about? And in line with that, the other question, have we always implemented these as of January the 1st or after the budget's been approved?
Mr. Shaggy?
Through the chair, I'll answer the second question first. January 1st is the normal time for fee changes, so this typically comes around this time of year so that the fee change happens then regardless of when the budget is passed. As to the first question, yes, in some previous reports we've ballparked, a 1% change in user fees equals about this many dollars. It's in the range of $100,000 for 1%. The difficulty we have is that there's some sensitivity in some of the fees, so a blanket statement like, 1% increase would generate another $100,000. There's some of the fees that we couldn't increase another 1% because of price sensitivities, because of legislation in comparison with other municipalities, as well as some of the fees have volume changes which throw, we've seen an uptick in use or a decrease in use, so there's some price elasticity in there as well. But it's roughly 1% is $100,000.
And actually that's what I was looking for. I know it's difficult to relate it to every item. So, yeah, 1% is in the neighborhood of $100,000. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. I have another question, just a general question on the auditorium complex. The fees, number 786 to 829. There's nothing in there about the Kitchener Rangers. How does that work? When we change fees every year, is there any impact to them, or how does that work?
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have a long-term contract with Kitchener Rangers, and so those fees are dealt separately from the annual fee schedule.
Is the long-term contract fixed, or are there factors in there to take care of inflation over the period of the contract?
So I believe that it is generally fixed with some periods for review, but I can certainly confirm that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Okay. So I guess I have just a follow-up a bit from the golf fees that were mentioned earlier. How many junior members do we actually have, or have we had in the past?
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know the number of members. I do know that this change was made to encourage the younger group of members. We had more of the older youth in memberships.
Okay, so you don't know if the majority of those youth fall into the younger category or the older category currently?
I would say to you, because of the change, that the majority would be in the older category.
In the older category?
We've created that younger group at a lower cost in order to encourage more youth of that younger group to get a membership.
Right. Also, another question regarding the annual aquatic fit pass and the annual lane swim pass. Are users allowed to pay for this fee over on a monthly basis, or is it a one lump sum amount?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, if I could perhaps know the fee number, it's a lot easier for me to...
Yeah, 862, I guess it is the aquatic fit pass, and I think the other one is right next to it.
862, and your question is whether or not this is paid over at one time or over a series of payments?
Yeah.
Oh,
the annual fees.
Yeah, this is, and there are probably people in this room that have the history that I don't, was before my time, but this is a pass that we no longer sell. It's grandfathered in, and only users that used it at a certain time previously are able to use it.
Oh, so it's not anything that can be purchased moving forward?
Not anymore, no.
Okay. On page 3-4, under the Kitchener Memorial Auditorium section, you refer to shiny. What is that? Shinny? Oh, hockey? Oh, okay. I don't have boys. Another thing, room rental fees. Is it possible to introduce a pilot project where we would have maybe one or two rooms or community centers where we waive those fees for organizations beyond neighborhood associations? I mean, currently neighborhood associations get free use of rooms, but other organizations don't. Would it be possible, rather than going full out, to introduce, in the report here we get detail like room such and such and the fees are such and such. Could we take some of those fees out and say there'd be zero fee for these rooms and try to book them for groups beyond neighborhood associations at no fee?
So through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of how the process currently works, there is flexibility to provide no-fee access to our community center space for organizations that clearly don't have the money to be able to pay the fee. Currently, that is decided upon on a case-by-case basis. We are undertaking a full review of two policies next year that will affect exactly what you're referencing. First, our neighborhood association policy will be reviewed to look at their access to space, and second will be, we have a policy on the use of city space specific to community centers. We'll be reviewing it as well and be looking to make improvements to try to achieve exactly what you're suggesting.
And what about fields, soccer fields in particular? I know there's a demand beyond minor sports that, to access those fields.
So that's not a part of the reviews that we're completing. It is part of a much bigger analysis around the Leisure Facilities Master Plan and how many fields we have and what quality and level of field of play that we have.
Okay. Can I keep talking? Oh, the parking fees, the special events parking fees. I know Mayor Bavanovich was in favor of seeing this $5 implementation for special events. I was at the Chris Kindle event this weekend, and that parking garage under City Hall was jam-packed. In fact, I went in and I went out, and I assume many people did the same. I wonder whether a $5 fee would actually change that, and in fact, I would imagine it might create unless the monitoring is done to prevent it, it would cause people going in and then leaving and having to reimburse that $5. For special events, would we not be better to keep it free, just so that people can come to these events and not be deterred by a parking fee? If we look at neighboring communities, Waterloo has free parking, more free parking than we have. Special events in particular, I think, would be a good way to get more people into the core for these special events. I'm speaking specifically about the special event parking fee.
Mr. Eidman?
Through the chair, so currently the only free parking that's provided during events is on Sunday. So on a Saturday, the typical weekday and Saturday rate applies. So that's up to about $17 if you're in there for a certain amount of time. So this would be a benefit for people attending sort of those longer events. So evenings on the weekdays, on Saturdays as well. So this would actually be a cost savings for most people attending events.
Okay, there's no fee on Saturday for the Chris Kindle. Is that because it was a BIA event? Was either Saturday or Sunday? Sunday. Oh, Sunday. Okay, I take that back. Okay. And I guess the building fees, can somebody explain to me exactly who pays these fees? Is it developers? Is it homeowners? Is it a combination of both?
Through the chair, so it is a combination of both. Anybody who requires a building permit would be required to pay these fees.
Okay, and given the amount of development that we've had over the past few years and more to come, would it be unreasonable to increase that building fee back to up 5% back to the pre-2017 rate?
Through the chair, so we do consult with the Home Builders Association on setting our fees. So we do have a reserve, and it is at the upper level of the reserve limit right now. So the commitment was to hold building fees at zero until that reserve comes more in line with the typical range.
And could that change at some point between now and next year, or is that pretty well carved in stone if we approve this?
Through the chair, so it would be, once council sets this fee, it would stay at that established rate for the next year. Staff would not recommend increasing the fee based on where the reserve is right now. So that money has to go into the building reserve. It doesn't go into our general tax revenue.
Mr. Haggie, do you want to add?
Sure. Through the chair, just to provide a little background, a few years ago when we were considering changing the building fees, dropping them, we went to the industry and asked them what their preference was. So we offered, a 10% decrease and then have 2 or 3% inflation over the next few years, or a 5% reduction, hold it at zero, those types of things. What they chose, what they said was best for them is a 5% decrease, hold at zero for the next few years. And then start introducing inflation. So we provided options to them and discussed it with them and went with what their preference was. And what's in the fee schedule reflects what their preference was.
Point of clarification, Mayor Vomenovich.
Just a very quick point. Because of the way the building enterprise is structured, are we also not limited that at the end of the day, we can have a certain amount in the reserve, but we actually can't ultimately make money off building fees? We're only allowed to essentially cover our expenses and have some in reserve?
Mm-hmm. Correct. So any of the fees collected by building must stay within building, so they can't be transferred to the tax base or anything else. So if we have a large surplus in building, it has to stay with the building enterprise. If we were ever to have a deficit, it would have to be funded by building permit fees as well. So the mayor is correct.
Okay, my last question is somewhat connected to that. Does the revenue that comes out of these user fees go back into the operating budget pot, or is it all designated to the different departments that provide these services?
So through the chair, the fees that are on the schedule that go to the various enterprises or utilities, and we'll get into a bit more detail as to what those are when we get into the budget cycle, those fees stay with those enterprises and utilities. The other fees that we see on the schedule here for things in like community services, corporate services, finance, those types of things, go against the costs in the tax-supported budget within those divisions and reduce the amount of tax revenue that we need overall to raise in order to fund all the programs and services at the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair Davey, and through you. My question as well was around parking, and I agree that I think it's innovative that we're doing the $5 fee. I think that's going to be really good. My question was around consultation with the downtown BIA, and how do you come up with the fees? My concern is, and to piggyback on Councillor Chapman, that when we raise fees, really we're taking away some opportunity with the downtown merchants to draw people to the downtown, which is what we're trying to do.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, we have a close working relationship with the downtown BIA, and we do consult with them on fee changes. So there's some programs that are in place right now, which I can update you outside of this meeting on, related to free parking and surface lots after 5 o'clock to really help promote access to downtown restaurants after work. So we do consult with them on a regular basis as we're establishing our fees related to parking.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Chair Davey. Not as much of a question, but just more for clarity's sake, on page 335, items 991 and 992 with the golf, with the age breakdown. A lot of sports groups are now eliminating those names like Adam, Novice, Pee Wee, and they're actually putting the age group. It might be like U19, under 19, under 10. So it might, just for clarity purposes, might be better to just name the ages instead of the group names and have them guess.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take that back to the sport development team. I think my understanding is there are pros and cons to both approaches, but we can certainly have a specific discussion on that.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a couple questions before we go for a second round. I don't have any particular issues with any of the set fees, just some questions in terms of the overarching rates that we're looking at. Historically, and I'm not sure where we got this information from, but did we not do research at some point in the past that said that when it comes to increases, residents preferred, if they had to choose, they would prefer higher user fee increases than tax levy increases? And where do we get that information? Does anyone recall? Mr. Hagee.
Through the chair, there's public policy information about that goods or services that benefit the broader community should be paid for by taxes. So things like roads that everybody has access to and would use on a normal basis, it makes sense to pay for those things through taxes. Goods or services that benefit an individual or a small number of people, the preference is generally to have those go on a user fee, because whether my kid swims or not doesn't really benefit you and the broader community a whole lot. So there's some public policy discussion about that. And sometimes in certain fees, you'll see that there's specific preference that they be held flat for a few years and then only be increased every 3 years. Rental water heater rates is one example of that. So they get held flat for a few years and then get increased by 5 or 10%. They're more the exception to the rule. Generally, it's seen as beneficial of increasing small amounts each year as opposed to holding flat and then having a big jump of 5, 10, 15%.
Okay, and historically as well, I've seen that the user fee increase, the suggestion by staff has usually been, sometimes at the rate of inflation, on occasion, maybe going back a bit further, a bit above the rate of inflation. I think the rate of inflation currently is around 2.4%.
2.4, correct.
Yeah, right. And we're actually generally speaking, we're targeting 2%, which is already well under.
Correct.
Is that because we started looking at these fees too early? I know inflation started jumping up in the summer. What's the rationale for that?
Through the chair, you're correct. When we are setting budget guidelines, we're doing that often in March or April, and we're looking at what the forecasts for inflation are for the whole year. Inflation's run a little higher than typical. But again, like you said, there are some years that we're slightly over. This just happens to be one year we're slightly under, so staff are comfortable with their approach.
Okay, that's obviously good news, and I'm very happy with that. But the one last question, not to jump to the end of the book then, but given the preference about user fees versus tax levy increases, and this being, I would say, well under inflation at the moment, does that indicate that, again, making this decision in the void of knowing what the tax levy increase suggestion is, can we take that to mean that our tax levy increase suggestion is going to be well within that range of inflation as well?
Is going to be
within the range of inflation as well, the proposed
absolutely.
increase by staff. Okay, thank you. Going on a second time, Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyways. My assumption is that our endeavor is always to be efficient in our delivery of services. That is both the service that we provide and the costs related to that service, correct? Okay, I'm seeing nods. So I do have a bit of an issue with some of the increases when related to user fees in sports complex and recreational, when the rationale given is similar to other municipalities. No two municipalities are the same in how they operate and aspect of their efficiency. But again, my full confidence in our corporation, our city, is that we are very efficient, that we do very well, and the service that we provide and costs are very efficient also. So why compare ourselves to other municipalities? Should not be rational. If we can afford to provide a better service at a lower cost, why not?
Mr. Bay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is a standard comparison that we make on a number of fees for at least as long as I've been here. My suggestion would be that when we see other municipalities are charging a fee and we're the only one charging a much lower fee, it makes good financial sense to align those two things so that we can generate additional revenue that can go back into the facility and into the program as was just being discussed.
Well, I'll make a comment about that afterwards. And going into the other questions I had started off in development costs, it was said most of these are related to sometimes, ineffective communication with the, say, the developer and our planning or engineering staff, and that incurs additional costs on our part of having to look at revisions. But going through on 3-45, and again, it could be my misunderstanding, so please correct. New water fee. Is that a fee for a new meter? My assumption for a new service, water connection.
Ms. McGoldrick.
So through you, Chair Davey, Councillor Singh, are you referring to fees 14?
3-45, 14. 24. Well, there's 1423 to 26. It's depending on the size of the pipe coming in, but I'm basing it on 1 1/4, which is relative to a home.
Correct. Yeah. And so these are costs for the purchase of a new meter, not a replacement meter. So with building the installation of a new meter, previously all ratepayers would have covered that cost. However, we know that we are an outlier in terms of that approach with most municipalities in terms of how they recover that new water meter installation fee.
So that is a new fee?
It is, correct.
That's not because they're not doing it correctly, that's a new fee that we're charging now.
Correct.
Okay. Going to page 3-45, impact post for meter set protection. That's a fee that we're charging to protect our unit, and of course the aspect of safety to the unit there, but that's a new fee there. Not related to a person's ineffective way of providing drawings or, in their consultation. It's just a new charge.
Correct.
And that would be related to new development as well. There are new meters installed, and now a new protection post is required also.
That's correct.
Okay. The next one is 1340, which I think speaks to cage for 5 PSI meter set. What is that?
So this is a protective surrounding around that particular meter on the gas side. And so it's a requirement where based on where the equipment is placed, there's specific protective requirements by legislation. So in some cases it's a cage, in some cases it's the post. In this case, it would be specialized around the cage for this particular meter set.
Are these larger meters or so more for commercial, industrial? Is that? I'm just looking at the cost and fee related to the post as opposed to the cage.
Right. Looking at the load, yes, these are larger meter sets.
Okay. And then 1345, where it speaks to gas design fee. Again, that's a new fee, right? So again, for new construction also, for a gas line coming in.
That is correct.
Okay. As well as, okay, that covers that. So I'll quickly make my comment to that if that's okay. Again, these costs do get passed on to the builder. Then it passes on to the new purchaser. And when we're relating our taxes, we always outline what an average home value is. It's about $250,000, correct?
It's just over $300,000.
300,000? Okay. So in relation to some of the fees that I just outlined, we're talking about a relative home ownership, for a new home ownership, increasing by a little over 1%, which is something that we have to be cognizant of about. The other question I have is on, no, I think that got answered. I'll quickly make the comment about the sidewalk cut. I agree with Councillor Marsh. I think if there's an avenue that service can be acquired through outside contractor and a lesser cost or competing, I think that should be given to the a homeowner, and I would recommend this report coming back to council before it's ratified, those options or it to be looked at. And my final comment to my initial point about the similarities of the municipalities, I appreciate the staff's rationale and that, again, any increase in fees does ultimately bring in extra revenue, which can help us to improve services or bring in additional services. But I don't like the rationale keeping in line with the municipalities. I think that it should be because we want to improve service, and that's why we're increasing it, not because we're trying to keep with other municipalities. As I earlier said, I think we provide good service at a low cost. We should endeavor to do that, not just because someone else is charging more, and for us to set ourselves to the same example. I won't make any changes now, recommend any changes now. I'm going to put some thought to it, but that's something, at least in recreational sport, that's something I may be suggesting in council, that for that it should be just an inflation, not setting an example to any other municipality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galway-Seelock.
Yes, I decided that I wanted to move a recommendation, so I have it written out. I can read it quickly. Just with regards to the golf, that line item 991, junior novice Adam, or whatever it's decided to be reduced to a fee of $325 in 2019 and $350 in 2020, and then the same for line item 992, that it be $425 in 2019 and $450 in 2020.
Mr. May, do you want to comment? Okay, please. Oh, go ahead.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, let me just look on the screen here because I think there may have been an error in what I heard, and I just want to see what you wrote here. So it should be line item 991 should go to 375 and then 350.
Okay.
Okay, so if I'm reading this right, then assuming for the moment there's the same number of, I'm just going to say younger age group and older age group, this would essentially be revenue neutral, according to roughly, even though there is actually more. But okay.
No,
okay.
That's not the intent. It is 325. I know what you're saying to be revenue neutral, but I think that the golf enterprise can carry a little bit. I think it's about more incentive for younger people. Like it's the same intent I think that staff have. But my bigger thing was the jump from 404 to 450 for the older group. So that's why I think that if we decrease each by $25 for this year and then bring it up to next year, we might be able to get some people interested, and then they can continue to move forward at the $350 or $450 in 2020. So it really is $325 as opposed to $370.
Okay, and we need to change the second amount too, right? The $350 in 2020 to what, sorry?
No, that stays at $425 and $450. So it brings us back up to what they want, like what staff are asking for. It's just a year. It's just a year later.
Can we get some further clarification from staff?
Okay, 1 second here.
All I'm doing
first,
is changing a fee that by $25
Mr. May?
in two lines.
So through you, Mr. Chair, up until last year, this fee was $404.
Right.
So you're going to reduce it by about $75, and then in 2020, go back up another $25?
No, so everybody was paying $404.
Yeah.
Everybody was paying $404. So we're reducing it to $325 for the younger group so that we can try and generate more interest and get people willing to do it and be participating in it, and then bring it back up to $350 in 2020. So everybody gets a $25 increase. So I'm trying to be fair between both of the groups. So yes, I understand that it is almost $80 savings for that age group this year, but the intent is to try and get more of that age group out to participate in golf. And if we can do that, we're going to generate more revenue. So I guess that's where my intent is coming behind, but also with the older group not having that significant of an increase.
Okay, Mr. Hagee?
Just through the chair, I just want to put something up because that I think demonstrates what we're trying to do, but I don't think that reflects. Never mind.
No problem. Okay, so we will take that separately. Anything further, Councillor Gallagher-Seelock?
No, it was just that. I think I've made my comments on it too.
Okay. Councillor Marsh.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm prepared to support Councillor Gallagher-Seelock's motion. Are we looking at that now, or are we taking the rest of comments and questions?
People in the queue now should still be for questions, and then we'll do comments after that. But we are actually getting a fair bit behind on schedule, so if people could keep their comments and questions to... Sorry? And we also have, we have an important meeting afterwards with an external consultant, so we can't be too late.
Okay.
Sorry, so Councillor Marsh.
Okay, one question then on page 3-45 regarding the new water meter fees. Just curious, I'm unfamiliar with how these work. Do the different sizes with the different prices, will they encourage builders to have does it affect the water flow in a new build? Would we be encouraging builders to have smaller water pipes by decreasing these, by having decreased fees for the smaller pipes?
Ms. McGolder?
So through you, Chair, yes, you are correct, Councillor Marsh, in terms of the meter defines the amount of flow available into the private plumbing, and our size based on the size of the service and the number of fixtures. That's defined through the building code, and so there's a relationship between Kitchener Utilities and building in terms of defining the correct water meter size based on the number of fixtures and intended use of the building.
Okay, so if there are 3 bathrooms in a new house, for example, then the water meter is not going to be allowed to be smaller than the recommended code that requirement of the code, I take it then. Is that right?
That's correct. So typically all residential meters are 5/8 inch, occasionally up to 1 inch, and then beyond that you'd be looking at other uses, property uses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rabinovich?
I have comments, so...
Okay, if you would mind just queuing back in? Yep. Councillor Gazzola?
I just want to ask a question on these golf fees. Can staff give me some indication of the number of individuals involved at this point?
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know the number of youth memberships that we have. I wouldn't suggest to you that it's an extremely large group.
Extreme what?
I don't believe it's an extremely large group.
Yeah, okay. I gather this recommendation came from the people that run the golf courses.
That's correct.
Can you just explain a little further their thinking as to the direction they were moving in?
Yeah, absolutely. So my understanding is that the older age junior golfers, there's a strong membership there at our golf courses. We looked at junior memberships at all of the other golf courses in the area, looked at comparables, and decided that it was the younger group that we weren't being as successful in attracting. And so by breaking out into two, staff's proposal drops the fee for that younger group to hopefully make it more attractive for them.
And council is recommending that you drop it even further.
And then increase it again in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now into comments then. Mayor Rabinovich.
Well, thank you. I guess I understand where Councillor Galloway-Seelock is going with this motion, and in principle, I like the idea of trying to attract more young people because we know that the number of people participating in golf has been going down. I guess before I'm prepared to support the amendment, I would like to have a better understanding of the numbers that we're talking about, and we must have an idea of ages as well. And so I'd like to at least see that information for next Monday, at which point I may in fact support this. Today I think I'll go with the recommendation in the main report, but potentially would be open to this decrease, this further decrease. I think the other challenge, just from an optics point of view, becomes next year then we're going to end up having more than a 1.5% or 2% increase as we bump it back up from 325 to 350, and that may create some challenges. So we should think about that as part of the decision. I think just overall in terms of the fees, I think staff have worked hard to keep them for the most part in the range of inflation. I do think, while there have been some comments made that comparator municipalities shouldn't be a major factor that we consider. The reality is, though, that is a factor that every business considers in setting its price points and determining, what sort of elasticity is there in the price, what's reasonable. And I think collectively we need to remember that if we're not attaining the funds here, the funds will need to be attained through property tax increases. And that ultimately ends up being a much more regressive form of dealing with these issues. If we don't, look at those opportunities where they're reasonable and they exist. I mean, we're in a two-tier region here with a number of neighboring municipalities very close by, and I think people make their decisions sometimes looking at how competitive or comparable we're being with with each other. And I think it is something that is a factor, particularly because it's those kinds of decisions that ultimately impact our ability to have the kind of network that we have with community centers, and to offer the higher level of programming that we do in Kitchener in comparison to some of the other cities. So I think all of those factors need to be considered.
Okay, I'll comment briefly as well. I think staff's done their work on this. I think I could be wrong, but I don't recall a time in the last 8 years where The suggestion has been almost 0.5% under the rate of inflation, so I'm very happy to see that. In terms of the amendment, I really appreciate where Councillor Galloway-Seelock is going, but I do actually have some concerns about lowering the rate, which, I mean, staff is recommending lowering the rate for the younger group for sure, but then bumping it back up I think is might be just cause some problems for next year. So pending some of that information that comes back, I may reconsider as well, but I do intend to go with staff's recommendation on this, and the golf enterprise, especially for the new members of council, is very near sort of a break even with the debt that it has right now. So I'm inclined to trust the process they went through to try and arrive at these numbers. Actually, we have a couple more people lined up in the queue now to comment. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but I also concur with what you're saying, Mr. Chair, and what the mayor is saying, that I'm overall satisfied with the rates that staff are recommending, and I know that it's not the people here that have come up with these rates, it's the people on the front lines that are on top of all of this. So overall, I think I'm satisfied with it. If anything, I would rather see an increases in user rather than tax rates, because user fees, you do have options. You don't have options when it comes to taxes. And on this particular one, I think staff have looked at it and have come a fair ways on it, and I'm prepared to support what's in the original staff recommendation.
Okay, and that actually reminds me, I don't have a mover for the main motion yet. Could I get a mover for that? Anyone? Mover, moved by Mayor Rabinovich. Okay, thank you. Next in line comments, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I'm hearing what's being said around the horseshoe, and I'm willing to just leave the junior fees for novice and Adam at $350, and then we don't have to do the increase next year, and leave it at that. But my whole intent initially was to soften the blow for the juniors, the peewee, the bantam, and the midgets, because they're going from $404 to $450, and so I think a stepped approach is more appropriate in that. We're talking about how much percentage of increase we're increasing other fees, and I don't know the exact percentage, but $46 is probably more than 2% increase, 10% increase. So that's why and where I'm coming from to try and reduce or step it for the older junior group. So I'm willing to just, I guess it would take out the whole line item 991, leave it as it is in the report, but I think line item 992 should be reduced to 425, and then we can either leave it till next year to decide 450, or we can leave that in so that it gives staff the direction that we're not opposed to an increase again for that junior older group.
Okay, very good. Councillor Chapman.
Okay, my comment is not directly related to the golf fees. Should I wait and hold off, or no?
Any comment you'd like to make?
Okay, it goes back to the user fees versus property taxes, and yes, I guess there are options to participate in activities or not participate in activities, but sometimes finances don't allow for those options, and I think that's something that one of the purposes of taxes is to redistribute the wealth in a way, right, which user fees don't. So if I'm have precarious employment, living on a small income, I don't have that choice to put my kids in swimming or put my kids in hockey. And I understand this Leisure Access card helps to offset that a bit. But my question would be, how many of those are available, and what is the vetting process? Is there a limited number of access cards available?
Okay, we are in comments, but I'll permit that, Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no limit on the number of leisure access cards that is available, and at no time, returning councillors will have heard me say this many times, at no time will we ever turn an applicant away because we don't have budget. So even if we have more needs than we have budgeted for, we will overspend in this account in order to allow people to participate in it.
Okay. So the maximum value of those leisure access cards is $250? Is that
That's correct. 215 for adults and 250 for children.
Okay, so that does not cover a golfing fee, user fee, right?
That's correct.
And on top of that, if somebody wanted to put their children in golf, they would have to have the money to rent the clubs or buy the balls and et cetera, right? So I just wanted to come back to the user fee versus property taxes, because I don't think it's not an option for so many people, especially in the current economy. That's all.
Okay, thank you for that. So it's the main motion's been moved by Mayor Verbanovich. We're going to vote first on the motion on the screen before us, and it's only the second part of it, Councillor Galarcila, correct, that we're going to be voting on? Okay, so reading from line item 992, reducing the fees to $425 in 2019 and $450 in 2020. So we're going to take a vote on that. Those in favor and opposed, that carries. Okay, now on the voting on the main motion, the balance of the user fees, those in favor and opposed, none are opposed, very good, that carries as well. So we have one item left. It is a very quick item. Hopefully we should be able to get through it right away. The sanitary sewer repair. Does anyone have any questions on this item? Councillor Schneider.
Just a comment, being that this is my ward, I have firsthand experience of the issues that come with this, and I really want to thank staff for some very fast and very efficient work and good work on this. I visited one of the homes when some of the incidents happened, and the septic smell is quite strong in these homes, so I really want to thank staff for a great plan and for all the work they put into this.
I take you'd like to move it as well then? Very good. As moved by Councillor Schneider, those in favor? And that carries unanimously as well. Very good. So that concludes Finance and Corporate Services. Mayor Verbanovich.
Okay, I'll call this special council meeting to order. Motion to go in camera for the items listed. Moved by Councillor Galloway-Seaglock, seconded by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And